Hey everybody, Jake here from Bearded Gear, and I am ready to do my full review on the WE Banter. The WE Banter is, if you aren't somehow already aware, a knife that was designed by Ben Petersen, and I really have been a little bit surprised by how much I've ended up enjoying this little knife. It is very simple in its looks and its design. It's not, personally for me, super exciting to look at, not very attention grabbing, but I've found that I like it quite a bit. As of when this goes live, I don't know if it'll be live yet, but I just did a podcast with Ben Petersen, and it was a lot of fun to spend a podcast talking to him. Somebody who, if you aren't aware of who he is, maybe watch the podcast, get to know who he is. But Ben was the guy behind Blade HQ's marketing team. He was the leader of the marketing team for quite a while, and he was their YouTube presence and a lot of their social, he ran the marketing team for a while, and he did a lot before that. He's actually been at Blade HQ a couple of times now and has since moved on and started Knafs, which is the label which his internal products come from, and then he designs knives and licenses them to, at this point, WE, but I believe there are other models in his future. In fact, he has expressly said so, so there are more knives to come from him. But for me, when I was getting into the hobby of knives, I've always carried knives, always appreciated knives, always liked them, but when I was getting into the hobby of collecting them and watching YouTube videos about them and being on Instagram, posting about them and engaging with the community, as I was getting into that and kind of discovering it, Blade HQ videos are a place where logically a lot of people will find the knife hobby and community. And for me, that's the way it was. I watched a lot of Blade HQ videos and just nerded out on all the stuff. And at that time, it was Ben who was in front of the camera and was talking. And I just found him approachable and pleasant and nice. And I liked the insights that he gave. And yeah, it was helpful for me coming into the community to have Ben making those videos at that time. So I think, and I've said this in my first impressions, I think a lot of the success of this knife model, if we're being objectively honest and we're just calling it like it is, has to do with the fact that Ben Petersen is behind it. And I think that's fair, and I think it can also be true that even though part of this knife's success is that he's behind it, it can also be true that the knife is objectively good. I'm not going to say this is my favorite knife. I'm not going to say this is the most exciting knife I've ever reviewed. But we're going to talk about this knife, and I think you'll find that just about everything I say about it actually is quite positive. And I think it's a good value for where it lands. Price-wise, I think it is a solid offering, and it's a good knife. Separate even from him being behind it. So anyways, let's jump right into it and just start talking details on this guy. So on here, we have a simple construction, fairly, of G10 handle scales. This example is in black G10, and then it's got all blacked out hardware, except for the blue thumb stud. If you're familiar with Ben, you'll know there's a shade of blue called Ben Blue in the knife world. Maybe not officially, but everyone kind of knows it. And we have a nice deep carry pocket clip. And then we have a blade in S35 VN, which I think at the price that this knife comes in at is an awesome choice. I think it works quite well here. And we have a liner lock. It's a liner just on one side. And yeah, it's fairly simple. This show side is all G10. We've got the liner, which one thing that I like on this blacked out version is that everything is blacked out except for the thumb studs, which are blue. So even all the internal hardware, everything is blacked out. I also like that the show side, there's no branding other than the pivot is a WE pivot, but there's nothing billboarded on the blade. On this side, it's typically even less than is on here, but it has the WIUG logo, which is what is up, guys. That's the way Ben would introduce, or he would start every video. And then we've got the steel marked real small down there. And then this one, because I got it from the Knafs website, which I'll have linked down below. they have an option when you're purchasing direct from them, because those are the ones that Ben and Athena, his wife, who you can meet if you listen to the podcast. She comes on at the end for a second. They ship them from home. It's them, their business. And so when they're sending them out, it costs a little bit more, but you get a bunch of extras, and I think it's absolutely worth it. Like, there's like a shop rag and a little strop thing and stropping compound, and there's stickers and a little note from them, and you can ask at checkout for Ben to engrave your blade with his name, which is just kind of rad and funny. And of course I had him do it, because, like, admittedly, he is why I have this knife, because I like him. I think he's cool. And especially lately, as I've gotten some opportunities to talk to him, even pre-podcast, he did the poster project with Vero and Raven the Pirate, and he reached out to me to send me one of those before they came out, which was really cool. And I got to talk to him a little bit then. And it's like, he's somebody that I've admired in the community. And so now that I've even gotten to talk to him, it's like, of course I want his knife, and I want him to sign it because it's his. It's a WE product, bear in mind. This is a WE catalog model. So it's not a Knafs model. This is licensed to WE, but it's his design. So that's kind of the way that works. Anyway, so the materials are nice. The all black finish is really cool. There are some of these about to come out in micarta scales, which I think is really cool. Part of me is like, dang it, I pulled the trigger like a month too soon or something like that, because I'm a sucker for micarta, and I don't necessarily see myself needing to have two of these. And I don't want to sell this one because I had him engrave it for me. So I think I'm just going to stick to the black on black on black, which I like as well, to be fair. So anyway, let's talk my typical review points. We're going to go over ergos, carry, cutting, and action. I always forget one of them for a moment, don't I? Real professional over here. So let's start with ergos. I like to start there. Ergos on this knife are surprisingly good. Maybe not surprisingly. So they're good. And I think a lot of that is owed to how neutral this handle shape actually is. And at a glance, it kind of just looks like a rectangle, doesn't it? But there is more happening than that, because you have this big swoop in here, which kind of locks your hand in. You've got a little bit of jimping naturally from the lock, the liner lock bar, where you're disengaging it. It's got some jimping there, but you do feel it a little bit in hand, so there's a little bit of jimping in there, not super aggressive or anything. And then back here where the curve kind of stops, you do get this little notch out as well. And then again up here for your palm, it's rounded, so it's not just a corner there. And it's almost a rectangle, but because these cuts are made into it, and it's got this curve and this curve, it just actually, like, I get full 4-finger grip on here. I wear a size medium glove, but I fill it out real well. And it's a comfortable spot to land. There's no hot spots anywhere on the knife. Everything feels smooth and comfortable, and frankly pretty locked in. For just being one continuous groove instead of having like multiple finger grooves, this feels quite nice. I like it ergonomically. So in a saber grip, still got all 4 fingers on here. It's nice. Hammer grip I do as well. So I like it in that way. Draw cut, very comfortable on here. Nice neutral handle. That's typically what that equals. Reverse grip, very, very comfortable. I like it quite a bit. Reverse grip draw cut, very comfortable as well. So any orientation that I put this knife into my hands, it feels very good, and it's very usable. Another thing, Ben has this kind of test of knives for himself to carry, where he likes to be able to reach out and be able to kind of touch the tip. And I joked in, I think, each of my videos about this knife so far, and again in the podcast, so I'm going to sound a little bit like a broken record here, but I really kind of, this is the way that the knife makes sense in my head. Ben is like a dad. He's got kids, and the types of things that he does with his knife often are like cutting out paper shapes for his kids to like help them sit still in church and stuff. Like, it's very dad stuff that he's doing, and it's slicing apples for them. And so like being able to do this grip is something that for him actually is pretty important. And when I talk to him about where he sees this knife kind of fitting, whether it's a EDC knife or a tactical knife or an outdoor knife, like what kind of knife is it? He kind of agreed in the podcast that it's a little bit of a dad knife, which I think is really cool. And like, I've got a 6-year-old daughter. I do quite a few dad things with my knives. I joke often, but it's completely true, that I open like a lot of Barbies and toys with my knives because that's the stuff I'm unboxing for my kid. And there's little rubber bands in there and like the intricate stuff you got to get into. And so I do find myself using weird grips, and that can be important on a knife. So I think this does kind of fit that role, and the ergos work in favor of that type of knife, if you're calling it a dad knife. All right, so ergos are very good. Let's talk action. That's a fun one. This knife obviously just has thumb studs. That's the only method of deployment on here. There's no flipper tab, no hole, no front flipper, nothing funky going on. Although I think I've seen some people have ground off the corner of this G10 and then maybe even put a little bit of jimping here on this part of the tang. If you can call that the tang, I don't know, the spine, and then made it into a front flipper, and supposedly that works. I don't really care to make it a front flipper. Front flippers are fun, but I don't need more of them around. Personally, they're just not my favorite thing ever. But yeah, for a thumb stud only knife, I actually like this a lot. I do prefer holes to studs. Absolutely, pretty much without fail. I would rather have a hole for deployment than have studs for deployment. But on here, these studs are positioned very well, and they just work. On the thumb stud, on this side, if you just kind of push forward, it flings open. The detent is tuned perfectly for it being a thumb stud. Sucks the knife back in pretty well. Yeah, it feels very positive. On closing the knife, it's very smooth. It's a thin, light little blade, so it's not super drop shutty, but it feels good. It works in that way. And then on top of that, with this stud, I can middle finger flick, and I do that probably more than I thumb flick it open. It's actually very easy and convenient to middle finger flip as thumb stud knives go. Just the positioning of the stud itself, I think, just lends it to be really good for that, which to me is important. My favorite way to open a knife is to middle finger flick it. I'd prefer for it to be with a hole, but if not, then the stud will do. And this stud does well for it. So yeah, nice and smooth. These bearings operate well, and it's built by WE, so I'm not surprised by that at all. WE knows how to dial in an action, and they've done it well here. All right, so we've done action and ergos. Let's talk carry for a second. Carrying this knife is really, really good. It's small, not only like short this way, but it's not overly wide this way. It's very thin this way. It's got one of my favorite pocket clips, period. I applaud every pocket clip that does this, and this is no different. It goes all the way to the butt end of the knife. That is my favorite thing. I want a deep carry clip to end where the knife ends. This one comes the tiniest hair past the knife, but not so much that it's a bother. This is like perfect placement of a clip. And then on top of that, the pocket clip is set down into the G10 scale. They've milled out a pocket for it, and then they've countersunk flat top hardware down into it. So there's nothing sticking up under this clip. That is the best way to do a pocket clip for my preferences. It's what I want. I will take this all day, every day, over a milled titanium pocket clip, a wire clip that does the same thing, frankly, would make me just as happy, maybe even a little more, because I love wire clips ergonomically and the way they just bounce off of things if you run into them in pocket, stuff like that. But anyway, as loop over deep carry clips go, this one it's perfect. It's a really, really great pocket clip, and I love it. I think it should be applauded. So this knife, size-wise, it's not a primary knife for me. I know for a lot of people, they're totally happy carrying just a small knife. There's been times in my life where I totally would carry just this knife, and I'd be fine with that. But now I'm just in this cycle and mode, and have been for a while, where I want my primary to be something a little more substantial, like 3.5-inch blade-ish, or at least 3.25. And I want it to just feel a little bit more confidence-inspiring, in case I have to use a knife defensively, or just if there's a real big hard use task that comes up that I'm not expecting. I want to have a robust, serious knife in my front pocket. And then I like to carry a littler one as a secondary in my back left pocket, sometimes in my fifth pocket or coin pocket. And this absolutely fits that bill. This, every time I've carried it, has been in my back left pocket as a secondary, and it's been perfect for it. It's thin, it's light, it's small, and it doesn't have a flipper tab sticking out. The pocket clip is perfect. Like, it's great. It is phenomenal to carry. It's absolutely a strong point of the knife. All right, so we've done carry, action, and ergos. That means what is left is cutting. We're going to get there, guys. It's late. All right, so this S35VN blade, you can see, is the DLC version, and it's kind of like a stonewashed DLC if you look at the finish on it. So it's already a little pre-beaten up for me. That way I don't have to feel bad about dragging it through a bunch of cardboard like I'm going to scratch it. It's a nice, tall, flat grind, and it's a thin blade stock to begin with. It's got a very sharp factory edge on it. WE does a great job at putting on edges. I always feel weird saying we. I feel like I'm grammatically incorrect. WE does a great job. It's like, I does a great job. Like, no. We do a great job would be the right way to say that. WE, the manufacturer, does a great job with putting edges on knives, and this is no different. This is a spear point, I would call that, and the tip is very predictable, easy to use, and the edge is great. It's held its edge fairly well. I haven't had to strop or do anything. It still feels sticky sharp. I've done a lot of opening boxes. I've done a lot of cardboard cutting, processing it for the dumpster. I have cut a couple of apples with this now. I've done some of that little arts and craftsy, like cutting out paper for my daughter. It's funny, we were coloring pictures the other night, and it was actually it was the night after I was getting ready for the podcast with Ben. Anyways, we were coloring, and she didn't even ask me to cut something out, but I was like, oh, I need to try it. So I laid down a piece of cardboard so I wasn't going to gouge down into the table, and then I cut out one of the pictures that I drew for her, and it worked well. You can kind of draw a line with your fingertip and cut it in this way. So that bend grip is a real thing. But yeah, the blade has done great at any cutting task that I've needed to use it for. And in talking to Ben about it, it's like, it makes sense for the way that he designed a knife, for the tasks he wants to do with it. A lot of them are a lot of the same tasks I find myself doing, especially with a secondary knife. And so the fact that when you cut into an apple, it slices it and doesn't split it. Like, that's something that he specifically wanted to be sure his knife didn't do, because he cuts a lot of apples for his kids, you know? And yeah, just the blade profile it's designed to be a good slicer. And the tip works very well for piercing tasks, but nothing about this knife is like tactical or aggressive or anything like that. This is just an EDC tool, and I dig that. I really, really like it. I'm going to try to stop quoting what Ben said to me in the podcast. You can just watch the podcast, but I like the way he talks about the philosophy of use for this knife and the way he talks about it being a tool, what type of tool he wants it to be, and I think he achieved that. I think this knife does well in those ways. So, carry, cutting, ergos, and action are all good. Every single one of them. Now, like I said at the beginning, that doesn't necessarily mean that I find this knife ultra exciting when I look at it just for what it is. I think the way this knife looks is not the most compelling knife out there. And he didn't design it to be. This isn't like this crazy artistic expression. It's not an Elijah Isham design with like crazy angles and, you know, like, this is a simple knife and it works. And that's what it was meant to be. So I don't find myself looking at it and being like, wow, like that thing, it doesn't elicit this major emotional response. It took me a long time to get one of these, with a lot of people saying they were great, because I just wasn't that excited about it. And the way I buy knives these days is typically, I got to be pretty excited, or at least really, really curious. Or it's got to be from a maker who's a friend. Like that's kind of the way my brain works these days. I don't just buy things because someone said, oh, that it's good. There's a lot of good knives out there. A lot. And I have to narrow it down more than just like, oh, some reviewers are saying that it's nice. You know, like, I want to get the things that appeal to me. And this didn't super appeal to me. But it's one of those things where now that I have it, and now that I've kind of bonded with it through carrying it and using it, I really, really like this knife. I've had a great time with it. I enjoy carrying it. I enjoy cutting with it. I like Ben even more now that I've had the chance to talk to him long form. And it's nice to have the knife that he designed. And we did a great job with it. we as in the manufacturer. Maybe I'm the only one that bothers, but I can be a little bit of a grammar police officer every now and then, and so using words that feel incorrect makes my brain do funny things. Anyway, we did a great job at nailing the manufacturing on here. It stayed centered. The action is excellent. It feels nice. The G10 is finished well, where it's not super aggressive, but it does have some grip to it. It's just all done well. They've done a good job at building this knife, and I think he accomplished his goals design-wise with the way that this knife actually came out. I think it is what he wanted it to be, and it lives up to him being somebody who handled thousands and thousands of knives for years and years, and then decided to make one that he wanted to have in his pocket for the things he wanted to do with a knife. I think this is great for that. I think you'd be hard-pressed to find another knife that exists on the market that would compete at doing the things he designed this to be specifically good for. And so it's a good design, in my opinion. Like, it worked out to be what he set out to make, and it's very functional. So, anyway, this has been the WE Banter full review. As I said earlier, I will link Knafs down below. I was excited to purchase mine from Knafs, not only because you could get it bundled with the extras and with his signature on it, but also because I like to support makers as directly as I can. A lot of the time, that makes a difference to me. It's like going to a concert and buying merch from the band's merch table rather than like going to Hot Topic and buying a band shirt. You know, like maybe I'm letting my teenage emo kid out a little bit by making that reference, but maybe you know what I mean. Like, it feels nice to have your money go as directly as it can to the person who created the thing. And even though this is a WE catalog model, to me it's Ben's knife. So just calling it the way it feels for me. Anyway, this has been the banter. I quite like it. And if you haven't watched the podcast, depending on when this goes live, that'll go live Wednesday morning. Yeah, I'll try to make this go live the same day. I think that would make a lot of sense. If you haven't watched the podcast yet, then check out the podcast. It was a lot of fun, and it's one of the shorter ones. It's not like a 4-hour long one. I think we went a little over an hour. So it's an easy, compared to my others, length to listen to or watch. So anyway, thank you guys for checking it out, and we'll see you on the next one.